interesting stuff going on and some fireworks going on. I'll tell you what, today, just breaking news in London today. We can do our quick look back on this story because this is a story that we have told you about, and it's certainly not over yet. But there was some really big news coming out of the English court system on the extradition request by the United States for Julian Assange, who has been in the English jail now, suffering under this extradition request for, I don't even know how long it's been. It's been at least a year, though, that this has been ongoing. And remember, he's been being kept in solitary confinement in the Old Bailey and subjected to, who knows what kind of treatment while he's there. Certainly some very serious questioning, I'm sure, is ongoing, and probably some efforts to destabilize his mental state, which, after, how many years has he been? 7, 8 years he was in the Ecuadorian embassy before they went in and got him, forcefully pulled him out. Remember, on video, they hauled him out, and he was kind of laying forward. Somebody had his feet. A couple guys had his feet. A couple guys had his arms, and, he was hog-tied, and they were carrying him out face forward out of there, and they took him right into the English jail.
He needs some vitamin D.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, he doesn't look well. He doesn't look well the times that we've seen him. So, and I'm sure he's not well. But the judge ruled, and I thought this was very interesting. The British judge, first of all, I was kind of expecting them to rule in favor of extradition, being the close relationship between the United States intelligence services and the British intelligence services, the GCHQ, which is the British version, essentially, of the NSA, but it's part of the Five Eyes alliance of countries that participate together in intelligence sharing. And, of course, we've talked extensively about that because that gets all into the surveillance of President Trump and some of his associates, George Papadopoulos and others, before and during the election.
Who's been on the show, George Papadopoulos.
George was on the show with us a couple of years ago. And so those countries, the Five Eyes countries, all share, and it's U.S., Canada, Britain, New Zealand, and Australia, the Five Eyes. And they all share intelligence. The eyes are just like, the eyes in your head. So they're all watching together and sharing the intelligence that they see together. And so it makes a convenient way for a domestic intelligence service like in the United States to acquire information on U.S. citizens because they can go through one of the Five Eyes countries who is not prohibited from surveilling U.S. citizens by U.S. law and by, for instance, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. So they could send the request through one of these other countries and get to the same information that way. And that's a lot of what went on during the campaign, or at least some of what went on during the campaign that President Trump won for president in 2016. And, of course, before that as well. So, but the update for today is that the British judge has ruled that the United States cannot extradite Julian Assange to the U.S. to face charges. I think he's facing 16 counts of espionage. And remember, Julian Assange holds himself out to be a journalist. And to date, nobody's ever been able to disprove. There's been no falsity proven in a single WikiLeaks story. And some interesting stuff came out recently that showed how much they were attempting to work through these issues with the United States government, with the State Department, about some of those cables that they were going to be releasing, which were going to be released by a bunch of different sources, and in fact were released actually in advance of the WikiLeaks release by other sources. They weren't prominent sources, and so nobody knew about them or heard about them unless you were really tech savvy. But they were released before WikiLeaks released them, and that was part of the discussion that they were having with the U.S. State Department and trying to protect people's identities in that situation. So, they were operating with some degree of concern for some of the issues that the U.S. has raised after the fact, saying, this is essentially espionage. And I've talked to a lot of people who do think it's some form of espionage. I've talked to a lot of people who think it is some form of journalism. I tend to think it's some form of journalism myself, but, I suppose reasonable minds could disagree about that. The important point for today, though, is no extradition. And what I thought was interesting was what the judge actually said about that. The reason for not granting the extradition request to the United States was that Mr. Assange is in such an extremely fragile mental state right now. and that she didn't think that he would survive. And furthermore, and I thought this line was particularly interesting in light of, the Jeffrey Epstein suicide. She was not satisfied that the U.S. could keep him from committing suicide, which I thought was a rather interesting way to put it.
Or she should have said, keep him from having something happen to him.
Keep him from being suicided, right? So, and I think that is the implication of what she said. Now, this particular ruling will be appealed. So I think they have only 7 days to appeal this ruling. So they don't get a long period of time. They're going to appeal it, though. And I don't know what the appellate court in the United Kingdom is going to do. Again, you've got to imagine there's going to be some heavy political pressure put on them to agree with the United States' request to extradite Assange. And, of course, floating out there, which has to be considered in this context, are all of the requests to President Trump to pardon Julian Assange. There was a big push by some Trump supporters, by a lot of people, to see if President Trump would not issue a pardon for Julian Assange, as well as Edward Snowden. But, in fact, Edward Snowden was one of the ones leading that charge. But there is kind of a dual push that perhaps President Trump could pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard. And if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.